Welcome to this Tackling Loneliness Hub webinar on intergenerational solutions to loneliness. So I'm Andrea Wigfield. I think I've seen many of you before. I'm a professor at Sheffield Hallam University. I'm director of the Centre for Loneliness Studies and also the Campaign to End Loneliness. And with Neighbourly Lab, we run the Tackling Loneliness Hub. So I'm really pleased that today we've got Charlotte Miller from Intergenerational England to talk about intergenerational activities and how they can support loneliness, and which sort of are the key groups of people that can be supported in that way. So as Abba said, if you've got any questions, put them into the chat and we'll address those at the end of the presentation. But likewise, if you want to leave your questions till the end and ask them personally, you can as well. So hand over to Charlotte.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Abba, as well. I'm going to share my screen and upload the presentation. So hopefully everyone can see that okay. If there's any issues with the sound or with the viewing, then please just pop it in the chat with thanks. So good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. I'm Charlotte Miller, as Andrea kindly introduced me, Director of Intergenerational Music Maker and co-founder of Intergenerational England. I'm also a paediatric music therapist. And we here at Intergenerational England, we've recently taken over the role of Secretariat for the APPG, tackling loneliness and connected communities. So it's a pleasure to be here and discuss with you all today on how intergenerational approaches can provide powerful, transformative solutions to one of the greatest public health challenges we face today, that being loneliness. And we know loneliness is not discriminative. It affects people across age, background, and circumstance. But we also know that connection is one of the most effective and lasting antidotes. So today, I'd like to collaboratively consider with you all, and hopefully at the end, we can have a really exciting, fruitful discussion. But I'd like to consider, first of all, what works in practice, whilst exploring how creativity, shared purpose, inclusive and community-based programs can break down generational divides and support long-term well-being. So this is, I'm supposed to say the team instead of this is the team here at Intergenerational England. And I'm thrilled that my co-founder is also on this call today as well, Emily Abbott. Okay, so before we delve into the intergenerational approach, here are some stats which acknowledge the current issues around loneliness. We know that loneliness is a complex emotion that transcends age, gender, and cultural boundaries and has a profound impact on mental, emotional, and physical well-being. As the World Health Organization's Commission on Social Connection has recently stated, social connection is now a global health priority. Lack of connection is associated with increased risks of anxiety, depression, suicide, dementia, cardiovascular disease, and also stroke. And if we are to help tackle loneliness, we first need to change our prejudiced notions of who it typically affects and instead acknowledge that it's not an exclusive club, but can affect anyone of any age. So these are some stats that I've taken from our intergenerational YouGov poll. Demographic changes are inevitable and much like climate change and really do require urgent and innovative solutions. Current generational discourse spans from politics to the housing crisis, workplace productivity, and also healthcare. And the increase in segregation of age groups leads to disparities across communities, impacting various aspects of life. More older people are living alone, and while opportunities for intergenerational interactions we're seeing are diminishing. And in our recent YouGov poll, as you can see here, 86% of adults agreed with the statement that mixing with people of different age groups, generations can generate mutual respect. And 83% of the adults agree with the statement that it can also reduce age-based stereotypes. So how can we respond to that? Well, how about if I told you that there was a powerful, cost-effective and inclusive approach that is totally rooted in agency, mutual respect, and shared experience? It's one that creates spaces for dialogue, storytelling, and connection. It's rooted in people, place, culture, and community. And that approach is intergenerational connectivity. This slide represents the strands of intergenerational impact and our approach to embedding it into society as a whole. And I'm just going to touch on those four pillars that you can see there. So intergenerational practice is all about intentionally designing opportunities for people of all ages to connect, collaborate, and thrive together. One is the intergenerational social support system. So we create networks of support that connect generations at a place-based level, enhancing both individual well-being and community resilience. Two is the life course approach. So promoting a dynamic view of aging, focusing on the continuum of care from childhood to old age and all of its nuances. And this approach really does promote holistic health and well-being, recognizing that intergenerational connections enrich every stage of the life course. Three is understanding intersectionality. So recognizing that individuals experience the world through multiple intersecting identities, such as age, race, gender, and socioeconomic status. And this approach highlights how these factors really shape people's experiences, ensuring that intergenerational solutions are inclusive and equitable for all. And lastly, intergenerational integrated partnerships. So we foster collaborations that integrate diverse sectors. So from health to education, business to housing, really to achieve lasting intergenerational change. I mean, intergenerational work, it is happening all around us, but the question really is, and the thinking is, how do we start to place value on intergenerational approaches and interactions, so making the accidental more intentional? And here is a nice quote for you about an intergenerational approach. So adopting this paradigm can actively challenge and break down stereotypes and prejudices that tend to be associated with age. By showcasing that people of different generations can relate, connect, and learn from one another, these interactions become powerful catalysts for promoting inclusivity. We know that building mutual exchange of care and companionship can go a long way in nurturing a profound sense of unity and belonging, and therefore dismantling the barriers of isolation. And it goes beyond promoting sort of the reintegration into society, but instead highlighting the intrinsic worth of every individual, regardless of their age. So intergenerational music making is Intergenerational England's delivery partner. It's a national not-for-profit organisation. We've got teams in Manchester, London, and Surrey, but we also work cross-border. And we're really dedicated to fostering connection and collaboration through music and creativity. I set it up in 2018, and IMM, we work across the sectors. So we work with care homes, schools, mosques, museums, housing associations, cultural spaces, NHS hospital wards, and we've delivered to date over 2,000 intergenerational projects, and we've trained nearly 700 individuals, so including care staff, young people, and volunteers. IMM's approach taps into this potential by leveraging really the universal language of music. Plus, we also do blend in other interventions and anchors, such as sport. It might be art. We've done music and yoga, youth social action, etc. All really aiming to bridge generational gaps and foster connections. Accessibility, inclusivity are paramount, and it requires collaboration with local organisations from across the ecosystem, offering very tailored and bespoke initiatives and ensuring that marginalised groups who may be more susceptible to loneliness really can actively participate. We know that a huge part of feeling connected is feeling heard, appreciated, and respected. And our vessel, it uses music and creativity as the tools to encourage self-expression and identity. Music transcends language and age. It can provide a unique platform for self-expression, and engaging in musical activities allows individuals to communicate and connect on a deeper level, fostering a sense of belonging and reducing the barriers that contribute to loneliness. So, Intergenerational England, and just wanted to kind of touch on our theory of change. IMEN was set up in 2018. Intergenerational England, we've been working on it for about 5 years, but it was set up 2 years ago. And Intergenerational England bridges practice and policy. We spent a huge amount of time consulting with researchers, politicians, sector leaders, community organisers, those individuals, volunteers on the ground, to help us in shaping really our theory of change. We came together 2 years ago at Windsor Castle, and we started to shape it. Our theory of change, it's simple, but it's also quite powerful. It embeds intergenerational practice across communities and systems, building stronger and more resilient societies. And our approach here at Intergenerational England really aims to strengthen emotional and economic well-being across the life course, reduce reliance on reactive public services, enhance employment, volunteering and participation, and encourage long-term systemic change. So not just creating one-off interventions, but something that has a real sustainability and legacy to it. So after we created our theory of change, we then pulled it down further into our 3 main pillars of focus. And they are housing, health, and workforce, all sitting above or sitting within the research and policy. So we have 3 task forces, one with the housing, one with the health, and one with the workforce. And those task forces are open to any individuals who would like to be part of that. Please, do get in touch afterwards if you'd like to be part of these sector conversations. In each of the pillars, we are doing a variety of different work. In housing, we have been creating an intergenerational social value, housing social value, and that report will be coming out next week, I think, looking at how councils, architects, housing associations, you name it, can use an intergenerational social value within their system. In health, we have been consulting with the integrated care systems and consulting on the NHS 10-year plan on how an intergenerational lens can be embedded within health systems. Within the workforce, we have our workforce task force, so looking at barriers, implications, mechanisms, solutions around a 5-generational workplace. And then we're doing a huge amount of research and policy. But if you are interested, please do just reach out. So, intergenerational life course approach. It's all encompassing and it's all inclusive. Working across the life course, and therefore we naturally work across the sectors, really helping to bridge bridge gaps across people, professionals, and understanding. And that's really what this slide demonstrates. Collectively, we must recognise the multifaceted nature of an individual's well-being. So it goes beyond traditional medical factors to incorporate social, cultural, and economic aspects, acknowledging that health is intricately linked to the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age. And in addressing issues like loneliness, it's imperative to therefore adopt this holistic approach and this holistic perspective that really encompasses these broader determinants. And therefore, we really must link sectors together. What we have found is that many sectors work in silo, and that's one of the things that we really wanted to try and break down in creating Intergenerational England. So when we have these, whether it's policy conversations or on the ground conversations, in the room and in those conversations, we will have representatives from across all sectors, which is absolutely vital and incredibly needed. So to truly address loneliness, we really must look not only at who is affected, but how and why. As we all know, loneliness is not experienced in isolation from other factors, and it's shaped by the intersection of age, disability, health, race, gender, geography, socioeconomic status, and many other factors. But that's why intergenerational practice really must be adaptive, inclusive, and culturally responsive. Research from the UK Office of National Stats and also from the What Works Wellbeing Centre highlights that meaningful social connections are the single most important protective factor against loneliness. And intergenerational models are uniquely positioned to create these connections because they encourage mutual exchange, they shift social norms around age, and they can build long-term social capacity. An intergenerational approach, it also aligns with the NHS England long-term plan and the Claire Fuller-Stocktate Integrated Care System report and the WHO's 2024-2026 global priority on social connection. So it isn't just about well-being, it's about prevention, inclusion, and system change. Breaking down generational divides. So what works? It's being intentionally, so having that intention, so designing activities that go beyond nice moments to foster sustained relationships and mutual benefit. Shared purpose, so programs really with a clear goal or creative anchor, could be music, could be storytelling, cooking, sport, gardening, you name it, but something that really unites people in action. Community embedness, so projects that are rooted in local identity and connected to local assets. This could be schools, churches, libraries, community centres, you name it. And then lastly, co-production. So involving both younger and older, all those from across the generations in shaping the work and really listening to lived experiences and valuing all voices equally. So the next video is an example of us intergenerational music making. And it was at the start, just before we were setting up Intergenerational England. But it's an example of us bringing together our on-the-ground community projects with those cross-sector voices to really demonstrate how this intergenerational framework sits across places and systems. Okay, so just before I conclude, just to wrap it up, so at both Intergenerational England and our delivery partner, Intergenerational Music Making, we recognise the power of bringing different generations together. Research indicates that intergenerational programmes and activities, they take many forms and are delivered in many different settings, but evidence does suggest that intergenerational activity can have a positive impact on participants. For example, it can reduce loneliness, it can improve mental health, increase mutual understanding, and also it can address some of the most important issues such as ageism, housing, and the social care crisis. Social connections are seen to be a crucial part of individual health and well-being and are fundamental aspects of people's lives, impacting on expressions of identity. And today you've seen how music and how it's being used is a really unique way of tackling barriers of disconnect and isolation, creating unique spaces for the sharing of cultural and heritage and the building of respect and empathy. So to conclude, it's a busy time here. It's Global Intergenerational Week, which we are really excited about. It's wonderful to be on this webinar with you all today. We've got events happening this week and next week. We have an online housing webinar taking place next week, and we've also got an online health webinar We have the World Health Organization talking on that. If you'd like to pop along to those lunchtime webinars, please do. And then we have our Parliament Roundtable next week on Thursday. So in terms of what we're doing in terms of campaigns and on the ground, so our award-winning outward-facing campaign is Let's Talking Generations. So over the past couple of years, we've been at train stations, we've been outside supermarkets, we've been in bus shelters, you name it. But really speaking to the public, speaking to individuals, and really highlighting the power of intergenerational connectivity particularly in tackling loneliness, but also listening to the individuals and finding out what really matters to them, and how we can change that and support them, but with that intergenerational lens. So to conclude, here's a list of our partners. In closing, intergenerational approaches are not a nice to have. They are a vital tool in the fight against loneliness. As you hopefully have seen, that it can offer practical, sustainable solutions rooted in empathy, creativity, and human connection. Because intergenerational connection doesn't just reduce loneliness in the short term, it actually builds the kind of community resilience that prevents it in the first place. It can break down stereotypes, create empathy across differences, and it can build social infrastructures that really benefit everyone across the life course. So as we look to the future, we here at IMM and also Intergenerational England, we remain very committed to embedding intergenerational thinking across systems and policies and places, ensuring that connection really does become the cornerstone of community well-being. And thank you very much to everyone for listening. And I look forward to the discussions and hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. That was really, really interesting and inspiring. So if anybody wants to ask any questions, either raise your hand or you can put them in the chat. I know we've already got a couple of questions in there. So Chris has been, you mentioned that you've got a housing element to your work, and Chris was asking if there's any content or data insights on intergenerational community housing. So don't know if you've got anything to share there, Charlotte, in terms of what that intergenerational housing looks like and what the results of any evaluations have been.
Yes, of course. And Chris, please do, I'll put my email in the chat, but we've got a huge amount of research and some wonderful case studies of intergenerational housing schemes, co-housing schemes, from the work that we're doing with the all-party parliamentary older people inquiry, which is intergenerational. There are some fantastic examples. Mellfield is one. There's the Old Hall, some of the almshouses. But there's a real buzz at the moment around, particularly, with creating 1.5 million new homes, new towns, regeneration policies. What are they going to look like, and how are they going to do it? So we've been, from the social value work, but also from the APPPG work, I'd be happy to share with you some fabulous case studies. Yeah, not a problem.
Thanks, Charlotte. So we've got another question from Andrew, who says the local church has been providing intergenerational practices, including music, for centuries. And what part would you say that faith communities play in the role of the work you do at Intergenerational England?
Oh, fabulous. What a great question. And, it's so wonderful because faith groups, churches, they've been doing it for years and years and years and years. And for us, when we first started to deliver intergenerational music making projects, they first started actually in churches. I think they play a absolutely huge and vital role. For us, the reason that we've worked very closely with Rock as one of our partners, a variety of different churches, across the UK, is that actually the intergenerational structure in the system is already embedded within the blood of that church, within the blood of that community, within the DNA. I myself, go to church. I was brought up in Sunday school with my granny Sissy and my granddad Wowo, and my mum was the Sunday school teacher. And Sunday for us, it began with church, and then it would finish with a big family lunch. And it was so intergenerational. And, me and my two siblings, we would love that Sunday morning, being with the family, being with our faith group. But the actual structure within the faith setting and within that, it's already there, that intergenerational infrastructure. So for us, we find that the volunteers, the systems are there. What we have worked quite closely with the churches is actually complemented, and I suppose for some of them grown their intergenerational work that they've been doing. I'm just thinking, one of our hubs down in Surrey, we have over 90 members that come there once a week. And we have church members, we have the homeless come, we have the local school, we have the Chinese community, the Hispanic community, we have the local LGBTQ plus older adult communities that come. But now we also have citizen advice that come. We also have the local GP. We also have the local social prescriber who come. And actually working with the faith groups, it's just blossomed their system. So yeah, I think it plays a huge part. Did I answer that all right?
Absolutely fine, thank you. I'm just going to, before there's some more questions and hands up, but just wanted to follow on from Andrew's question about faith. As you were talking, I was just thinking about sport and football in particular, because I'm a big football fan. And it strikes me that, again, in the same way that sort of places of worship are places where there's communal singing and intergenerational activity, that's the same, a football match. You get a whole range of generations, from young children to their grandparents and everything in between. And there's this sort of idea of singing together and that fostering community spirit. Have you done any work with sports clubs around the country, football clubs, for example?
Oh, is that for me, Andrea?
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
we have done, last year we did a national, it was called Move and Groove, and it was sport and music blended together. Yes. And that was, we did 10 pilots throughout the UK. Music and sport naturally very, complement each other. So we have used music and sport, but absolutely, I think going back to football associations, football stadiums, the element of music and singing together, creating that sense of, cohesion and collectiveness is very much present there. And one of our kind of ideas, actually, football associations, football clubs, they could and should become intergenerational hubs as well. Is there an opportunity there? That we would love to explore. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so back to the chat, we've got a question from Helen, asking really for some advice on how you would suggest that she engages with schools. So she says that she's worked closely with people with dementia and runs a number of groups, but has had some difficulty getting schools engaged because of issues like safeguarding, for example. So have you got any advice on how she might break down those barriers and challenges?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Thanks for the question. It's a real tricky one. When, obviously when you're delivering an intergenerational project, or you're creating an intergenerational whatever event, what it might be, you'll have those from across the life course, but you'll have those, with different backgrounds, different makeups, disabilities, abilities, you name it. So we take IMM, we take safeguarding very, very seriously and very carefully. For us, our mechanism is we have a bank of intergenerational connectors, and they are based across the country. And all those connectors, not all, because gosh, they're absolute gold dust within the team. But what they do is that they sit on health and wellbeing boards, they sit on school councils, they go to chit chat coffee mornings. And in terms of schools, they sit on some of the academy quarterly meetings. We then would go into a school and present what an intergenerational project looks like. We might do an assembly. And we have then we have an enrichment pack. And in that enrichment pack, there are all the consent, safeguarding, et cetera, about that. We've done it two ways, bringing children out of schools into a community intergenerational project, or we've done it the other way, where we've brought individuals and community members into an educational setting. But yeah, just reach out and I'd be happy to share those enrichment packs with you, because if you're looking to kickstart something, then yeah, we can help you with that. Not at all.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thanks.
Thank you. And now we've got Chris. You've got your hand up. Would you like to ask a question?
Charlotte, follow up on the housing side. I've signed up for next Monday's event, so thanks for putting that in the chat. What I'm particularly interested in is any case studies that tackle the private landlord sector. I'm not sure if there's an association for private landlords, but what interests me is for high cost residential locations across London, for example, intergenerational housing, I think, is a very good model. And I just wondered if there was any work going on or any insight into taking that to the private landlords across the city.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And what I'll do, Chris, is I'll check on our housing task force if there are any of those representatives on there, and link you up. But it's a really good question. I think off the top of my head, I'm not sure if there is an overarching. I'll find out, but yeah. I'll link you up.
I think
sure.
maybe Emily wants to jump in there on that.
Emily might know.
Hi everyone. I'm Emily. I'm co-founder with Charlotte of Intergenerational England, and it's just I had to jump in because I've been in the housing world all morning, so it feels very fresh in my mind. But yeah, there's a huge amount of energy in this space at the moment, and it's covering from kind of residential and assisted living right through to co-housing, private landlords, regeneration, and there's key players in this field that are trying to develop practice and evidence base. But I think one of the key parts of the puzzle, and one that we're trying to really push forward at the minute, is that clarifying of impact, and specifically looking at sort of the next stage in the commitment of the new towns, and also the 1.5 million homes retrograding, and it's trying to develop that sort of shared language and shared impact model, so that from development right through to procurement, we have an understanding that to build an intergenerational way is going to, support the longevity society that we're now living in. And it's quite a tricky balance to take when you're kind of balancing demand and need, on a community human level, with this vision of the future and vision of how we do it. And on the conversation this morning, it was really interesting, specifically looking at co-housing, which I know is a different world altogether. But that sliding scale of intergenerational, and actually, how do you embed the principles of intergenerational living, whether that is through architectural design or actually supporting sort of the social infrastructure around a community. So there's a huge, underused community centres at the minute, and looking at the spaces in between residential flats, for example. How do you articulate the value of these intergenerational social connections to people across the ecosystem and the hierarchy of development and housing? But there's definitely an appetite for it, and I think the private sector world, it'd be great to talk more about it, because that's one that I think in all of these conversations, that changing of mindset and repositioning the intention and the value behind investing in that long-term intergenerational structure is one that is really present at the moment. So it would be really interesting to have that conversation and get your thoughts, specifically looking at inner city London, that debate between infrastructure and communities from urban to inner city. That's also one that's very much at the forefront. So yeah, maybe we could take this offline and discuss more and bring you into some of those wider conversations.
Thank you, Emily and Charlotte. Harry, you've got your hand up, I think. You got
Oh
a
yeah.
question?
Hi everyone. Thank you. Yeah, question for Charlotte or Emily. It's brilliant to see examples of the events and the initiatives, and the videos were brilliant. My question is I'm just wondering, either on the part of older people or younger people, is there do people want more intergenerational mixing? Do you have anecdotal stories, or is there any data that says that this is a thing that people kind of want more of? You know, is there appetite for it? Because we can clearly see it's wonderful when it happens, and we can obviously see that it's a hard thing. You know, it doesn't sort of happen without some help. But is it a thing that's really kind of wanted? And perhaps also the corollary question is, are there any kind of resistances or barriers or doubts or misgivings that people have about mixing across generations?
Mm-hmm.
Great question, Harry.
Yes, brilliant. First of all, going to the research side of and the stats and data, great timing, because we have just done a very intensive national piece of research, which is coming out, I think it's next week it's coming out. And it's really interesting. Yes, some of the data, well, the majority of the data shows that there is a thirst and there is, you know, a want and an interest in more intergenerational opportunities, or society being more intergenerationally connected across, particularly in tackling, you know, ageism, but also many of the members who have been part of the consultations, understanding and seeing the benefits that it can have for health, for whether it's, you know, mental, physical, emotional, cognitive, so seeing the health benefits. What is interesting in that data is the pockets. So there was some interesting data from Ireland and from Wales as well that we found. But yes, certainly from our kind of research and from our YouGovs that we've done, there seems to be this. I think what we have found is that it's about putting the intentionality on it, and it's about creating the opportunities. So our outward facing, you know, talking generations is about providing those spaces, igniting those conversations, and inviting people from all backgrounds, all generations, you know, all ages, to really start thinking and start that discourse between different age groups. It's not, and I think the problem has been, not a problem, but, and it's one of the questions, is that when people sometimes think about intergenerational, very quickly, what comes to mind is the older people care home show on Channel 4, which, you know, was absolutely fantastic. It very much got it on the map. But that was very much obviously about taking young children into a care home. Now, for us, that is just one of the elements. You know, intergenerational for us, we work with 18-year-olds and 30-year-olds, or we work with 96-year-olds and 60, you know, 101 and 60. It's not the extremities. It's not young and old. So that's something that we, with our campaigns and with the work in Intergenerational England, is trying to dismantle a little bit. And particularly with 5 generations in the workforce, you know, it's very easy for people to hold on to, Gen Z, Gen X, baby boomers, alphas, blah, 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 and putting generations into boxes. For some, certainly, you know, I think it can be helpful, but we want to break that down a little bit and think of it more across the life course. In terms of resistance and any of the barriers, for us, on the ground, delivery-wise, it's actually transport. I'm going to be really, you know, funding is another thing. So there are some real kind of practical, tangible barriers. A lot of our projects and our funding, you know, we put on buses, we put on taxi services. We've done projects, oh my goodness, in just some of the most bizarre places you can imagine, because that is just the place that people from different generations can get to, but we'll do it. That's that. I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah, just really quickly, I think, you know, it's really present at the moment, whether you're looking at media or politics, or this kind of generational boxing is occupying a lot of the discourse nationally, and so it's very easy for us to fall into those habits. And again, from a housing perspective or a health perspective, for years we have looked at people in these silos of age. How we group people, whether that's on a national survey, or how we group people in terms of housing arrangements or health priorities. We look at those age boxes, and I think it's so ingrained in our culture that actually one of the big pieces of work that Charlotte and I are trying to do is challenge that and dismantle some of those silos, because ultimately, we all make our way through life. We go through all of those life stages, and breaking down some of the preconceptions and both the internal and external ageism that we see. And it brings in the loneliness conversation as well, because I think, for a long time, we have an assumption of who loneliness naturally affects and what the picture of loneliness looks like. And I think that narrative is shifting as well. And with that, we have to shift our response and our solution building to align to that. It is a demographic, demographically, we're changing exponentially. We're all living longer, people are having less children. So the makeup of the population in our society is evolving, rapidly. And if you look at us on the global sort of platform, we're a very age segregated society. And that, there's a lot of factors that contribute to that. And I think the language and the sort of the narrative that comes through the media and comes through politics is sort of perpetuating that divide. But there's a lot we can learn from these global examples, and there's a lot we can also learn from, the cultural elements of it. A lot of these ways of living and ways of working are still being done daily by cultural groups, the South Asian family networks that care for their elders and that's embedded within their communities. We as our Western way have lost that kind of value of those relationships. And so for us, it's really, there's a cultural social shift that needs to happen alongside all of these big policy strategic developments. And it's something that includes all of us. We're very passionate about the fact that everyone is part of an intergenerational society. We all have a role to play within that. And I think that's the first step is what we're striving to really embed and champion.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question. So you've touched on this, but we'll ask it anyway, from Jake, who says, how can we ensure that intergenerational support isn't just framed as younger people supporting older people, but it's mutually enriching and benefiting for both groups?
Yeah. Yes, and I think, I touched on that earlier in reference to the Older People Channel 4 programme. I think for us at Intergenerational England, it's about, at the moment, it's about really getting that kind of that life course understanding approach embedded within each of the sectors and what that looks like. So it's not just young and old, but it's got to be supported, and the evidence has got to be supported. There is a huge amount of data around the benefits certainly for older people, we found within the intergenerational space, not so much for the younger beneficiaries. So there is still space for development, within that and work, I think, which needs, to be carried out. But I hope, through our messaging and through the policy work, and through the real variety of different intergenerational projects that are out there, hopefully, collectively we can showcase those, and it can show that it's not just the extremities, it's not the older and the younger, it can look different. Yeah.
I was just running a focus group last week of teenagers, so between 16 and 19, and to talk about intergenerational activities, actually. And it was interesting because they came along slightly negative, thinking that this might be really boring, and by the end I actually couldn't stop them talking, and they were really interested in it. And by the end, they were just saying how much they'd enjoyed the discussion. So I think, once you start embarking and getting people engaged into the topic, I think that, that's a way that you can sort of inspire them to understand the importance and value of intergenerational relationships. Because quite often we think that meaningful relationships are only created with our peers. I think that's an initial perception that people have, and obviously it's much more than that. Great. So if anyone's got a burning question, if you want to ask now, otherwise we'll say thank you to Charlotte and also to Emily for your wonderful contributions. And I believe that the slides will be available. Is that right? Will we be able to share them after to participants? Yeah, great. Oh, and Abba's just arrived back in time to say goodbye.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Charlotte. So the recording will be made available on the Hub and on our YouTube channel as well, along with the slides. And if you need any more information, please feel free to get in touch and we'll put you in touch with Charlotte or Emily. Thanks for attending, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks for listening.